Hello again. You've seen the title, you know what I've done, you know what I've been up to. I said in the last video, I don't really like the island anymore. And that was true. So, for this devlog, I decided to change it. So, let me explain what my problem with the previous version is. So, in that video, I said that there was a lot of space on that island. And what I mean by there was a lot of space for the player to run around in, if you know what I mean. A lot of space for me to put stuff in. And that's still true, but there wasn't a lot of space for the actual biomes to breathe, if you know what I mean. Like the actual biomes themselves, like they got very little room. Like it sort of looked a little cramped, and that was especially clear to me when I added the oasis to the desert biome, and it was just sort of plopped in the middle, and it took up like a third of the biome. So I had two options. Option number one is I could just make this island bigger, which yeah, I could do probably. The problem with that is I've already made the landscape in the engine, in the game, I mean. And so, I think I'd probably have to start over from scratch if I wanted to just remake the island, but bigger. And I don't really want to do that. I still liked the original island. So what I've decided to do is option 2, which is just to take the snowy waste biome and the desert biome and just split them off into their own islands. So I got to work on the snowy waste island first. And has anyone ever watched Total Drama Island when they were a kid? It's the one with the goth girl. It's one of the reasons you are the way that you are. Anyway, you guys remember the Skull Island? That's sort of my inspiration for this island in this game. I obviously didn't make it literally make the island skull shaped, because that would be too on the nose. I did make it partially skull shaped though. It kind of looks like a crab if you look at it. So that was honestly all pretty easy. I think it took me like 2 tries to get the shape that I wanted. So I was trying to envision myself okay, what do I want it to look like when the player is coming up to this island? And I thought it would look really cool if I had these 2 mountain valleys on the sides of the island. It almost looks like the player's entering into a cage, or the jaws of some massive creature. So I started work on that, and I won't lie, it was a little tedious. It was a little boring. I'm just placing 2 different variations of the 2 same rock assets over and over again, trying my best to make it not look obvious that it's the same 2 over and over again. I experimented with different rotations, different sizes, just something to not make you look at it and be like, these are just two of the same rocks. Or at least make it not obvious. People obviously still tell if they look at it for long enough, but upon initial viewing, you're probably not gonna notice, hopefully. I mean, I'm telling you right now, so you make sure you don't tell anybody, I'll find you. So yeah, I once I got done with that, I was looking at it and I was like, this looks cool. I like this. But then, my brain said to me but what would be really cool? I was like, please don't. What if it went all the way around the island instead of just at the front? It was a valley that went all the way around the island, and I was like, that wouldn't look really cool. So then I had to continue it all the way around the island, which again was even more tedious because then before I was just having to they were all like I said, I was like trying different rotations and that, but they're all still going in like one direction. Like the problem with it going all the way around the island is now it has to curve. So I had to make sure that didn't look bad. Like the curve looked like good, but also not like unnatural, I guess. Anyway, like I was saying, I made this sound more deep than what it actually is. I don't know, man. I just work here. I'm just placing rocks and shit. I don't know. So anyway, once I got that done and I was happy with that, I mean, it's not actually done yet because like I started working on, because I also want to have like little teeny tiny rocks along the bottom and like fill the gaps in that, and that's probably going to be even more tedious, so I'm going to do that later. Anyway, once I got happy with that, I started doing just the same stuff I did on the first island, making the surface uneven so that it's not just all a flat pancake. I tried smoothing along and like sort of curving like the edge of the island so that it's again not just flat. It looks like it'll actually like lead into the ocean. Anyway, after that, I'm thinking that it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that at the moment, at least. So I'm gonna turn my attention to the desert island. Now the desert island was also pretty easy, actually even easier than the snowy waste island, because I didn't have to place a bunch of rocks everywhere. But what I did do was, once I got the shape that I want, which I'm not gonna lie to you, there's no inspiration for this island other than, I don't know, I guess my only thoughts are from the desert in Breath of the Wild. But what I've done is I've made this particular surface extra like bumpy, so that I'm not just, you guys remember previously in the desert when I made like man-made looking hills. I'm not doing that this time. That just I can't get that to look good. That just looks bad. So yeah, after I got the shape and lumpiness and did the same thing, curving the edges and that, I placed in the bloody oasis, or at least I painted on the grass, I guess. So once I was happy with the shape of the islands and they're obviously not done, but I was pretty happy with how they were coming along. So I decided to go back to the main island. I don't really know what to call this island now, because it's not the only island like it was before, but it's also not like it's like 3 biomes in one. The island that you start on, and I decided to, remove those 2 biomes from that island because I don't need them anymore. They've got their own gigantic islands to themselves. They don't need to be here anymore. So, I flattened out the desert to get rid of those weird hills and make sure that it was lighter that time. And it was a really tedious process because I had to so painstakingly and gently go across it. And I can't wait to change my mind later and undo all of it. So I was looking at, and I basically just extended all like the 3 other biomes. So the plains biome goes a bit downwards now. The red forest biome goes all the way to the top of the island now. The forest biome, I've made some interesting decisions with. I've still extended it, but it's like extending almost like a claw. Am I calling these episodes now? Is that a thing I'm doing? I don't know. Probably, I guess. So the reason I've done this is because I thought it was a bit weird how, both visually and gameplay wise, it was a bit weird that we had this super safe biome, like literally no hostile creatures here, right next to a super dangerous biome. So I thought, I'll extend the forest biome so that there's a bit of an in-between. You don't just go straight from, being safe to, dying immediately, probably. So now it's time for the part that I have a lot of PTSD over: the ocean. So, the ocean is a problem, and I would personally like to just get rid of it. But I can't. So, let me break it down for you. So, originally, I just extended the ocean, and I thought that would do the trick. And, upon extending it, it looked pretty good. Like, upon initial glance, it looked pretty good. But then I took a closer look at it, and I realized that the ocean and the landscapes aren't actually, interacting at all. If you get what I mean. It's like they exist in two different worlds, and they're just, like I have an ocean, and then I have a landscape. I don't have an ocean and a landscape, if you get what I mean. That's what it looked like. I mean, I don't know why I'm over-explaining it. I'm probably showing you what it looks like right now. So previously, the last time I worked on the landscape, I spent hours working with the splinal points, trying to get it to look good. And I'm very dismayed to say that the hours spent fiddling around with it have gone up dramatically, and the reason for that is I couldn't figure out why the ocean was just ignoring these landscapes. Actual hours just fiddling around with it, trying to get it to work. I went on, I looked on the forums, I looked on Reddit, I looked across the internet, didn't find any solutions. I posted my own forum. I don't think anyone knew how to fix this. I tried making a new splinter point, duplicating the old one. It just did not want to acknowledge it at all. I tried, just getting... I thought about getting rid of the ocean, just making a new one, but then I really didn't want to do the main island again. I did find one guy with a solution, but I was really struggling to figure out what he was talking about. To solve that, I dumped the original water brush manager. Okay, so he deleted the old one. Got that. Then create a new edit layer on my second landscape. Okay, got that. Just created a new edit layer on the landscape. Pretty easy, okay. Finally, right-click the new layer to brushes and click the add button. Huh? I understood steps 1 and 2. 3, I have no idea what he's talking about. So after hours of, messing around, I finally realized what he meant. So what you've got to do is you've got to click on the landscape that you want to add a water brush to, and then you have to go to the add button, and then you add a new water brush manager. If you just try to add a new water brush manager without actually selecting the landscape with the landscape selection option, it's not going to work. The water brush will just simply exist without any, knowing which landscape to target. So anyway, with hours of my life down the drain, it was time to put even more hours of my life down the drain. I don't know why, but for some reason, you can't just have multiple splinal points all with the same effect. I tried making adding a new one, didn't work, didn't do anything. I tried duplicating the first one, didn't work, didn't do anything. Only the original first one will actually have an effect on anything. So what I did was I just took a point of the original spline point and dragged it all the way over to the new island. And yeah, then I just extended it from there. And you know, it took a while. It was, being uncooperative for a fair bit. Random holes in the ocean started appearing. That was a bit concerning. But with some constant fiddling around, I eventually got it to work. What other island? I don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, I finally, I got the basic outline of the Snowy Waste Island with the spinal points, and after that it just was a little bit of fidgeting around to get it to look how I wanted it to look, and it was a lot. This part was a lot easier than I remember. Still took a bit and was a bit tedious, but like compared to literal hours of just trying to get the damn thing to work, this was actually pretty pleasant. So yeah, that was nice. And then I moved on to the desert island, and it was another solid probably hour of trying to get it to work, because for some reason the stuff that I did with the Snowy Waste Island just simply didn't want to work with the desert island. Like the water blueprint brush worked all fine, like that was fine, but for some reason the spinal points just again didn't want to cooperate. These things are the bane of my existence. I think I tried like 2 or 3 times to get it to work until I eventually just threw a complete Hail Mary, and it just thought okay, what if instead of dragging the spinal point to the edge and starting there, I drag it all the way to the corner and then drag another one all the way to the other corner and see if that works. And thankfully it did. I don't know why the method for the Snowy Waste Island didn't work for the desert island. I don't know why they had to be different. I don't know if it's something to do with the specific points or settings or something. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just glad to have it working. So anyway, then again, it was some more fidgeting around. You guys know what goes on at this point. I just tidy it up and make it look pretty. I finally got the island and ocean all interacting, and it looks good. But I wanted to add a few more things, because obviously obviously they both look pretty empty at the moment. It's not gonna stay like that. I'm obviously gonna put stuff here, and I may as well start now. The Snowy Waste has this cool valley of mountains, and the desert is, while fitting, it's kind of barren. So I started off by putting those two giant mountains that were in the previous desert biome on the main island back in the corner. I'm not gonna lie, they look a bit more out of place than they did before, because the island's a lot bigger now. But hey, I can always make some changes, I guess. They're just gonna be there for now, I think. In the Oasis, I said previously, I thought it would be cool to maybe have a village there. So that's what I've decided to get a rough idea of what that might look like. This is obviously not what it's gonna look like when the game is finished, because it's just a bunch of houses for now. So basically, I made some new blueprint actors. I made two different types of houses. I made a little small house, and then I made a little bit of a long house. And originally, I was gonna make it entirely out of the buildables that I made in the previous devlog, because I thought, it would be cool if the player could sort of build onto and expand these houses should they so please. But if I do that, then the player can also deconstruct these houses, and then the villagers won't have anywhere to live. And I don't know, for now, I'm gonna say no. So yeah, they're mostly just made out of the static meshes for now, because the only real difference between the static mesh and the buildables is that the actual buildable actor that the player can create, you're able to attach things onto and deconstruct and all that jazz. But you know, the door is still a buildable, so hey, if it really pleases you, you can steal their doors. So I mean, I think that's pretty funny. I did that in a D&D campaign once. So after I built the, you know, I made the houses and I was pretty happy with them, I'd sort of just place them around like randomly in the Oasis. I could use the PCG for this, but I want them to be in predetermined spots, just so that, you know, I can easily like stylize and customize the village to my liking. So after that, I painted sort of like this stone road that leads to all of the houses, and I also I put the actual like pool of water, I suppose you would call it a lake, back in the middle of the Oasis, because it's not really an oasis without it, is it? So yeah, after that, I was looking at the stone. I was looking at the stone road. I was like, it looks a little weird. Like it's lacking depth, I think. So what I did was I told the PCG, like, hey, anywhere that there is stone, I want you to add some rocks. I didn't want to do it myself. That would have taken a lot of time. So yeah, after that, like it added the rocks, and I had to tweak it a little bit to get like the density of rocks to a level that I liked. And you know, I do like how it looks on the actual road, but I'm not a big fan of how it looks in the lake. I don't know, like, yeah, it definitely looks a little weird in the actual lake. I don't know, you guys let me know. I might end up having to do it manually anyway, and it'll probably look better if I do it manually, so I'll probably end up doing it manually at some point. So you may have noticed throughout this video, there's been a lack of me actually like playing the level and like showing you how it looks from the player character's perspective. That's because of the amount of stuff I've added and the lack of optimization. I'm afraid of my PC blowing up. But I do want you guys to see what it's like from the player perspective, and you know, it has to be playable at some point. So I decided to, you know, I may as well start the process that no big studio seems to want to do anymore, and optimize my game. So, you know, this is just going to be a whole bunch of technical stuff. Like, I had to look up how to actually do that, because I've never made a game that is big enough where like optimization was like a problem that crossed my mind. You know, if you've seen my previous game, it's like one level with like a couple assets that with enemies that spawn in, like that's it. So the first step to optimization was actually in the PCG, or all three of the PCGs, I should say, because I have three of them now, one for each island. So basically, in there, for each thing that you spawn, there's a thing called call distance. Basically tells the game when to actually spawn it in, like how far away does the player have to be before it actually gets spawned in. So, you know, I used the edge of the desert as sort of a reference, basically, because I still wanted the player to be able to see the forest, because it would look weird otherwise, because like the player would look back at the previous island, and it would, you know, the forest wouldn't be there, and they would be like, it should be there, because I was just there, I know that it's there. So I use that as sort of a reference to try and, set the call distance to, you know, one where like you could just barely see like the forest when you look back at the island, but you can't really see anything past that. I'll also probably like add some fog and stuff to, so that, the player doesn't have to, like, suspend disbelief or whatever. Like, I'll make sure to, like, add a reason as to why the player can't see, like, that much further back. Obviously, like, that's just for, like, the trees and that in the forest. All of, like, the little rocks and flowers and stuff have a much shorter call distance, so the player has to actually, like, basically the player has to actually, like, be in that biome for them to spawn, because, you're not going to be able to see it from the desert island. It doesn't need to spawn in when you're all the way over there. So I had made sure to, sort of set each one accordingly. They're not all the bloody same, because they don't need to be. I did the same thing with all the rocks in the level, like the mountain range and the snowy wastes, because that's not spawned in my PCG. It's actually, like, I actually placed it in the level, so I'd select every rock and make sure that I set the call distance to something appropriate, like, like, again, like, using the edge of the island for reference. Like, the player should be able to see, like, some of the rocks, some of the, and I think that would be cool. Like, the player gets to the edge of the first island and they look out and they can just barely make out the mountain valley. There's a second value in PCG that you gotta set. So basically, if you look at the actual, like, trees and stuff in game, they sort of, like, the leaves and that and, like, the plants, like, they sort of, like, sway a little bit in the wind. And this value is to basically tell the engine, like, when to stop doing that. Because obviously if the player is super far away, they're not going to be able to see that anyway. So you may as well just tell the engine to stop rendering it. Because the player's too far away. They can't see it anyway. So I did that for all the trees and all the plants. And that was pretty easy. That it's literally just, like, one value across the board. Because, it's not like with the trees where, like, super far away I want you to see. Like, it's pretty subtle. Like, you can only really tell when you get up close. So I just made it the same value across the board. And the third and final thing that I did for optimization was I opened up basically every static mesh, and basically there's this, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's this thing called LODs, where basically, like, the mesh has different states that it will render depending on how far away the player is. So if the player is super close, it'll obviously render the full mesh, with all of its, all of its details and all that. But if the player is super far away, like, obviously, like, I've made it so that, the trees and that still spawn in, like, you can still see it, but, like, the game doesn't need to render every single detail. So basically, I've just gone through every mesh that spawns in the game, and I've set it so that, the further away the player is, the less of the mesh that it will render, like, the less detailed the mesh will get, basically. So with all that done, I was pretty confident that I could play the game without my PC, catching fire. So I'm going to just, show you some footage of, what it all looks like from the player's perspective, and I hope you like it. Now, I think that all looks pretty cool. But you know what sounds pretty cool? I don't know if you've noticed, if you've been paying attention, you might have, but I've had some different music playing in the background. Different from what I usually have. That's because I've had someone offer to do the music for the game. A very talented person by the name of Meal on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure that that's what he goes across all social medias that he uses. He's going to be uploading a video with all the songs that I've selected to be in the game so far. I'll put a link to that in the description, and I'll also put a link to his YouTube channel in the description. We've also had some art done up for the game, so I'll make sure to put the credit towards that person in the description, and I'll ask Neil to put a link to it in his video's description as well. That's basically it for this video. I'm very happy now with how the islands are coming along, and I'm getting pretty happy with how the game itself is coming along. Thank you again to Meal for doing the music. I really do appreciate it. And to the rest of you, have a good day, eh? Oh no, man, I just realized I haven't been recording. God damn it. Fat Michael, Fat Michael.